We're going to explore what happens when the pace of AI outpaces the limits of our infrastructure. And we're going to look at real constraints, including GPU scarcity, energy use, governance, and we're going to highlight the breakthroughs redefining what's possible. Personally, I've spent much of my career in this space at the intersection of scale and change. At Google, I helped scale the company's telecom and data infrastructure during hypergrowth. I built the playbook for network layer upgrades and across our global data centers, and I later accelerated the internal secure AI framework program. And now at Synopsys, I lead strategy and operations for their central engineering group, and we own the Gen AI Genetics Center of Excellence. And my group is making sure that innovation and responsibility move together and not apart. And through my work as CEO of Capistrant Consulting Group, I help businesses identify and solve their most expensive problems in 2-week sprints. I have a full-time job. We have to do it fast. And I'm thrilled to be joined by 3 experts who've built and operated systems at massive scale and are now reimagining what AI infrastructure can become. And you're going to hear from Rebecca Naughton from Lambda, Anna Jacobi from Gathid, Shub Shrivastava from Google. So we'll have them introduce themselves in a moment. They bring deep experience across data centers, systems design, and AI orchestration. And basically, the message you're going to hear is the next era of AI infrastructure isn't just about more compute. It's about smarter design, shared accountability, and the foresight to evolve faster than the constraints around us. So I'm going to start us off with a nice, easy question for the panelists, and you can introduce yourself as you chime in on it. The first question is, if a company only had limited time and resources, what would you prioritize first to make use of AI, both responsible and scalable?
So thank you, Tammy, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Shub Shrivastava, and I'm a senior cloud architect at Google Cloud, where I help our West Select enterprise customer to build anything from agentic AI infra, app mod, and everything in between. In my past life, I was a solution architect at AWS, and I'm just very happy and thrilled to be part of this panel. And yeah, I'm very, very excited to actually answer that question. And when you just said that question, when we are working at a hyperscaler like Google, right? And even like in our day-to-day life, when we're envisioning products, when we are talking to our customers, it's like time, resource constraint, bringing products to the market faster, designing a managed service is like a core for any kind of product development. And I do have a really interesting take on that and how to do it. And I do believe if there is a time and resource constraint, reliability or responsible AI cannot be an afterthought. I believe you cannot scale and then think about the reasonable or responsible AI. You have to kind of have that baked as a part of your core infrastructure. And that's what we do like as a hyperscaler. And a very good, like I can give you an example, Tammy, to kind of like validate that point. Like having some kind of like a controller or kind of a gateway layer can really help customers or enterprises who are kind of like fighting between like the time and resource constraint and thinking about scalability and also responsible AI. So having like that a central, I mean, I don't want to call it call that as a bottleneck, but still some kind of a controller, which kind of hits both the point, right? So for example, scalability, how do we do that? Suppose we have so many application teams who are trying to build their AI, agentic, or whatever workloads, and they're trying to do like API call from their code. I do not want all of the traffic across the enterprise to go to different models, and I'm not able to scale it properly. There's no governance and management. The governance as well as the policy needs to come at a centralized or a control level. So if they want to scale, it goes through like a gateway sort of a architecture, and you can tap into your usage, the patterns, and then you can scale. And what if tomorrow I have a new shiny model? I can just replace the model, and all of those application team can quickly, have access to my model. So that's how I vision scale. The second part was the responsible AI. I also have the provision now to put all of my policy in that controller level. So everything, all the guardrails I need, if I want to do content moderation, I want to remove toxicity, any kind of filters in my prompt, I can do that at a very core level. So if I look at like time constraint, go-to-market speed, scalability, responsible AI, this is how I envision it, having like essential point of control for everything. So that's my take on it.
Thank you, Shub. Bink, if a company had only limited time and resources, what would you prioritize to make the use of AI both responsible and scalable?
Thanks, Tammy. So I'll introduce myself first. I am Rebecca Naughton. Recently joined Lambda, but previously with about 25 years of hyperscaler experience working in data center capacity and optimization. One of the things that is probably the best part about today for me is recognizing that we're kind of back at the point of innovation and creativity that we were when I started, which is a gas. But it is also true that having worked in building infrastructure for everything from the early days of the Human Genome Project all the way up through most recently AI requirements for the large-scale training facilities at Microsoft, when I came to Lambda, the interesting part here is I get to look at it from the perspective of a cloud provider and look at it in the broad scale. And so I'm looking forward to that. And it gives me a chance to think about how we position for responsible AI in the sense of both how you architect, but also how you think about what work needs to be done. And for anybody who was on the morning panel, I did some discussion of basically, for me, there's a lot of opportunity to overuse AI without value, right?
Yeah.
We're still discovering, we're very early on in the sense of what AI can do for businesses and how that needs to convert. And so for me, I look at it and say, okay, what is the thing that I need to get out of this? You build your experiment, you investigate whether or not you're getting what you want, you tune in the small, and then you take it to the large. And for me, that's really the best way to kind of tackle that problem. Um, you've heard the statement, move slow is fast. And I believe that because there's a lot of opportunity to take it the wrong way, especially as we're learning and before the sort of app stack has matured to the point where, hey, that does exactly what I want it to do, and it's already been tuned. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Bink. Anna, what advice would you give to a company that had limited resources and time?
Awesome. That's a great question. First, my name is Anna Jacobi. I'm an AI advisor for Gathid, which is a digital twin for identity management. I have been cleaning up and working on workflows for 3 decades. I started with embedded systems at Lockheed, where I was managing data through watching an oscilloscope. I don't know if anybody remembers that. But I then worked at AMD, where I was running 500 chips and created their first data warehouse. I implemented infrastructure as a service for break-fix ticketing at Facebook for our data centers. And now I am teaching and writing about AI sustainability, as well as writing a white paper on federated exchange systems for an A-to-A economy. So if I had to say what you should probably look at is what is your business model, not so much what is your LLM. Know what you want to build, know what your problems are, what your pain points are, not only internally. If you have more than one person in your company, you probably already have a communications problem. You would need to figure out how you explain AI between your different teams. What are they going to implement? Not only that, your customer. I was at Stanford yesterday, and the utilities department is like, "Why aren't the data centers talking to me? Why don't I understand what's going on?" Same with politicians. Not only know what your customers' pain points are and their problems, but also their customers, their tertiary customers. Go to a conference that is not in your area and hear how they speak, because they're speaking about their problems. This is moving so fast, and we've all been in a lot of probably different revolutions of where data is going, you're going to hear the hints. Remember, design to tape out takes 65 weeks. We already know probably at AMD what's going to be coming out in the future, or a data center doesn't be built out in 1 week. It takes years, right? Figure out what each other are speaking about, and make sure that you're not just implementing AI for AI. Because once you figure out your business problem, your pain points, you've cleaned up your data, you understand the taxonomy between your internal communications and your customers, once you start implementing agentic systems, it's going to go so smoothly. Half my time is in meetings, and probably one sprint is actually in the compute side.
Thank you, Anna. I think we're going to take it from small businesses that have, or companies that have limited time and resources, and talk to Shub about Google Cloud. Shub, you've helped major customers optimize AI workloads on Google Cloud. When a team achieves that 30% gain in cost optimization or performance, what usually drives it, and what is often overhyped? And I'm curious also if others have found different levers that make the biggest impact.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Tammy, because I feel it's a very timely question, because a lot of our customer and enterprise are there in the weeds and, want to realize that 30% cost efficiency. Because if you look at these enterprise companies, that kind of translates into millions and dollars of revenue at the end of the day, right? Like if you were able to achieve that much savings. So everyone is looking for where that efficiency dividend is, right? So, and I would love to answer this question from exactly what we see in the market, like in the industry, the trends, and how it translates into innovation and how it drives those gains. And I would love to talk about what is the overhyped part of it as well, because that's something I would love to also touch upon. So starting with like, in our industry, there's a biggest problem that all of us are aware of, and that is the GPU accelerator constraint. Like the obtainability is such a huge challenge. And when we are asking all of these companies to build or like stand up their AI workloads, it is very, very important to have a specialization infrastructure, right? So start from the infrastructure layer, where what we would advise is, if you see like you have the biggest ever accelerator like H100, it's not 100% certain that it's good for your workload. So you just cannot pick and choose the biggest possible, or the biggest model and the biggest accelerator available. There has to be some kind of evaluation for that. So kind of like focusing on the benchmarking, evaluating, and knowing which workload is good for which infrastructure kind of starts building that very efficient layer for you for like cost optimization and efficiency. So that's the first point. The second thing that is very important, and which I was really amazed that we have not given so much importance to that, because this is where a lot of the efficiency is driven. And that is the traffic distribution for LLM inferencing or any Gen AI inferencing. So having an efficient inferencing technique for any enterprise workload is the key, because it's very different than your normal application serving. When you do like Gen AI inferencing or any AI workload inferencing, these requests can last from few seconds to minutes, right? Like and with your normal web serving, it's like few seconds of your request. So how your GPU or your accelerator is being used and utilized, and what kind of load balancing you're doing, that is key. So using some innovation around, for example, using a specialized inference gateway that also takes into account things like KV cache utilization, as well as the queue depth, that makes your utilization of your hardware really optimal, is the key. So highly recommend looking into some kind of better way of doing intelligent and innovative way of doing load balancing for these workloads.
Even from our sponsor, Weka.
Yeah.
Consider talking to them.
Yes.
That's actually a beautiful segue for me.
Yes, definitely. And the last part to this is, again, a biggest challenge is we see our customers saying that the GPU allocation is such a big hurdle for us. We have the GPU, we have the workload. How do we make sure that they are allocated in a way that it's optimal, right? And oftentimes than not, the answer lies is not using the biggest possible 70 billion parameter model, but to fine tune these models into probably smaller version of models, or do your routing into LoRa adapters, right? So that you can like bin pack these smaller version of your models into maybe a single GPU or a TPU slice. So that way you are not kind of indexing so heavily on the size of the model and the size of the hardware. So in my opinion, if you are not orchestrating your infrastructure layer in a way, let's say it's adding extra 500 milliseconds of overhead before your prompt is actually hitting your LLM, then in my opinion, you already lost the performance gain. So it's very important to think from the uncool, unsexy part of like your hardware, your inference layer, how you're using your GPUs and what kind of models you're using. So yeah, that's my take on it.
That was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bink, you said you had, there was a segue for you.
Yeah.
So having spent some time working on large scale telemetry systems in a similar environment, and also thinking about how we would drive it for large scale training, this topic has come up a couple of times in various talks today. Transparency of data, the ability to observe how your system is operating, even when you don't necessarily know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
That piece of it, and being able to see that data, not necessarily in a straight up synchronized at the same time digital twin strategy, but being able to see it quickly and to recognize where you are seeing constraints manifest, where you are seeing some of these opportunities come up. That's an experimental process that has to be gone through. And to Shub's point, it's not particularly cool,
Yeah.
but it is very bread and butter for understanding what you need to do in order to get to efficiency. And as the application evolves, you are going to chase bottlenecks, right? You cannot chase bottlenecks without deep telemetry and high amounts of observability on the workloads, and also on all the systems that are influencing how well the hardware is performing. And that's a place where I really spent a lot of time, because we're in a stage where the interaction between the supporting environment for the servers and the network has become increasingly important and has its own risks injected into overall performance and reliability. So from that perspective, we have a huge opportunity, and there's been a lot of movement on this from an open source perspective, to basically build the observability we need in from the ground layer, so that we have that data, and that we can use it consistently to understand our performance and our opportunity to improve.
I mean, you've built telemetry systems at massive scale. What would you say the underused signal is that tends to predict problems early?
So there's two things that I find interesting. Number one is, how much power are you using out of your available power? And then how much of that is actually being used by the servers that are running? Large scale infrastructure, like any IT infrastructure, has a tendency to accumulate cruft and unidentified losses. And so building your system so that you reflect your environment correctly and completely, and you treat it as, okay, wait a minute, something's happening that I can't see. That means I have a potential problem. What is that? What can I trace that problem to? That is the ability, that gives you the ability to really speed up your analysis of the situation and identify your bottlenecks.
And how do you decide what's a valuable signal versus noise?
Does it show up multiple times? And if it shows up multiple times, that's valuable to me.
Yeah.
Honestly, all signal is useful, but what you wind up having to do is tune for effectively the rhythm of the various systems that you're looking at, right? I'm not gonna check environmental temperature in a hot aisle every 15 minutes, because that's too slow. Do I need to do it every 1 minute? Maybe. Do I need to do it every second? Probably not. And I'm also going to get other data from the system that will, from telemetry elsewhere in the system that'll let me understand at that level of granularity. So there is tuning to do there.
Thank you, Bink. I have a question for you, Anna.
Uh-oh.
Sustainability has become a design boundary, not just a corporate goal. When power or water become the limiting factors, where do you think infrastructure should adapt first?
Well, I want to play off of Bink of transparency. I think that's extremely important because your bottlenecks are not going to be just internal, but they're going to be everything that you build may touch downstream and upstream from what you're working on. So everything that you're building today, in a couple decades, you're going to still see that. And you want to make sure that you are sustainable. But what is sustainability? Sustainability is not saving the planet. It is an ethical, environmental, and economical, environmental, and ethical approach of how to build on top of what we're already building. So humans have a place to be in the future. There are many stats out there about where we may or may not be in an existence after 2100. 68% of all data centers are currently in a water dehydrated area. But that doesn't mean I don't want to adopt AI. I want to make sure that ethically all my data has association across all my customers, and that if I'm caching that in a GDPR location, that I'm keeping that data in a specific area. I want to make sure that economically, if I'm building out an A-to-A economy, I want to make sure that even the SMBs are having access to those GPUs and to the compute power. And then from an environmental perspective, every prompt is a sip of water. Every PowerPoint presentation is 1,000 showers. If all of a sudden we create a calorie count of energy and water that we're using on TikTok, does that mean that we won't be using the energy? Probably not. We still go to McDonald's, we still eat there. We're not going to go on a diet all of a sudden, but we're going to have transparency. But you need to get ahead of it before the politicians do, because you are smarter, hopefully, than they are. Right, like last month, not to call out, but California vetoed a bill that will allow WE to be required in all fabs and data centers. We have a 20% gap of water in California right now, and he did not really want that to be something that we considered as we move forward in a sustainable approach. So sustainability isn't something you have to adopt if you don't want to, but just be transparent about it, be understanding of what are those trade-offs. If you want to replicate your data in multiple languages across the world, that is going to require energy and compute and water. And just because you have inline cooling, if you have creating electricity with coal or natural gas, it still takes water. Solar still needs to wash off those panels. So it's something that should be hopefully in your OKRs or KPIs. I would love that if you just put a little bit in there. But just being aware of it is probably the number one thing that any company can do.
Thank you. And you have talked a lot today about the thread that connects everything. And I think there's a personal element here that is important as well. So um, I'm not using, like, for example, Mid-Journey just for fun. I make decisions like that personally because I'm not trying to use AI where I don't need to use AI. It's not at scale of a company, but I think even from a personal level, we can also make adjustments and um, enact change. Bink, I want to build on something that Anna was talking about. So when a site hits water or power limits, what innovations or design choices have helped the most?
So at this stage, I would look at it as siting, like, where do we go? Okay. Yes, there will be a situation where we will have to go into a water constrained area. The opportunities there are effectively to basically just monitor your usage and be studious about what's going on. In the case of a cloud provider like we are, you have the opportunity to influence how your customers see that data and help them understand. But we're going to come back to it. It's transparency. You have to have the ability to see what's happening, and you have to be, to Anna's point, counting your calories in order to be able to act. At some level, that's PM 101, right? You got to make the problem visible first. But by choice, I think a lot of it also has to do is to be in places where you're not actually going to overstress things, in as much as you can, because the business is going to need to happen.
I love the innovative approach. Just don't get yourself in that situation.
Well, it sounds like a non-answer, but I think the point Anna raised was really relevant in that the business is going to need to be where it needs to be. And at that level, there are a lot of optimization choices you can make in terms of how you approach the problem, how you scale, that are ground level, right? They're just how you approach the issue. And then after that, you have opportunities on the technology side to optimize what you're running. And that, for me right now, is the best answer I've got, which is algorithmic improvement.
Thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that one?
I was just to Anna's point before, and also Blink was talking about telemetry and how when you have so many data points and then there's so many signals, it was so hard for you to even make sense when you have so much data. And that's one of the things that we see in like agentic AI workflows as well. Like context is so important. So when we are tapping into all of these things, be it like your metrics related to your data centers or your GPUs or sustainability, I think it's really important to kind of tap into what makes sense for your business, and that's how that kind of like also kind of lays the groundwork of how you want to evolve, right? So I think those data points are very important, but also picking and choosing the right kind of metrics to tap into plays a really important role that I see, because now any new tool that you want to integrate for any kind of AI system, they come with their like 200 sets of metrics. So it's so hard to kind of make sense of like what makes sense, what is breaking, and if something is breaking, where you have to pay attention. So just wanted to add to her point before about like telemetry and monitoring of the things.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Shub. In our last few seconds here, I have a little closing out, but is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we end the show?
Give me a shot of whiskey and then we can talk.
We're almost there. Yeah,
We are the
bottlenecks.
bottlenecks towards the happy hour, so we don't want to be that.
Yeah, so I think we're going to wrap now. I'm sure everyone is ready for at least the happy hour and dinner and some networking potentially, or your bed. I don't know, depends on how your day has gone. What stands out to me from the discussion is the human element and the critical thinking that has to be present for us to have, the human in the loop, of course, you've heard, but I think even with telemetry, you're not trying to build all of the dashboards and the data outputs that you can. You're being intentional about it. And I think critical thinking is going to be one of those. How do we build interview questions for the skills of the future around critical thinking, around emotional intelligence? Because the human element is going to be even more important than, say, the tech element at some point.
For sure.
Because we can do the tech without the technicians at some level. So that's, I think, what the one thing that came out of this for me is that the humans are needed for the breakthroughs.
Definitely.
So, thank you, panelists, so much. Thanks, Ignite, and thank you to Women in AI for sponsoring us as well and bringing us to this panel. And I'll see you all out there at
In the
end.
happy hour.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.